And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. How's everybody living? Hope we're having an awesome day. It is Tuesday, May 9th, 2023, coming at you for another live episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. We are on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres, and we are on Twitter at Torres Sports. If you're joining us in the live stream, thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to talk some Ducks with me. Go ahead and hop in that live chat, drop a comment, let me know how you're feeling about Oregon football recruiting, and just kind of whatever's going on, in your life or with the Ducks right now. As you guys know, I like to build an Oregon football community here on the podcast and on my platform. So I love hearing what's going on with you guys. I might try to do a mailbag portion at the latter end of this show. Not totally sure yet. Got a pretty busy day making it out to some high school showcases here in the LA area today. But long story short, on this episode of the podcast, I'm going to be going in depth on my latest recruiting prediction for Oregon football in the 2024 class, and just kind of going to be explaining the pick, talking about what the pick would mean, and kind of whatever else comes up. So if you guys have any questions, I'll try to get to them. Like I said, it's a really busy day, but I wanted to make sure that I got this one recorded and up for you guys, the listeners, the fans, the viewers. So with all that being said, let's hop into it. My latest recruiting prediction for Oregon in the 2024 recruiting class. I wrote a story on ducksdigest.com that you can go over and read. I logged a prediction for Oregon to land 2024 Baltimore, Maryland, St. Francis quarterback Michael Van Buren, probably the biggest name in Oregon recruiting space right now. One of the biggest names at the quarterback position in the 2024 class. He's an Under Armour All-American caliber guy, kind of a dual threat quarterback. It's kind of that mold he falls into. Doesn't have the wheels that like a Luke Moga does. We can talk more about him later on in this episode, but really polished passer. Love what he brings to the table as a quarterback. So what do we know right now about Michael Van Buren? Right now with Michael Van Buren, we know that he took 2 visits out to Eugene in the month of April. That second one coming for the spring game, Oregon's marquee recruiting event of the calendar year. Over 100 recruits in attendance, and Michael Van Buren has absolutely become a priority for Will Stein and the Ducks here in the 2024 recruiting class out on the trail. So he was recently in Eugene for that spring game, also competed in the Elite 11 Eugene Regional, absolutely tore that event up from what we saw in the results. Did not earn an invite to the Elite 11 finals. I think the only person to leave that event with an invite to the finals was Domino, the number 1 player in the country. Had previously been a target for Oregon in the 2024 recruiting class out of Pinnacle High School in Phoenix, Arizona. But it looks like the Ducks have fitted there a little bit. But that's okay, because I was writing the other day, if you were to gauge, the noise around one recruit in Oregon, you might blow out the speakers if you're talking about Michael Van Buren. I mean, there's no school that's being more heavily linked to Michael Van Buren right now than the Oregon Ducks, and that's a fact. But we need to explain, why there is that buzz, right? So what do we know about Michael Van Buren? He's working from a top 3 of Oregon, Maryland, and Penn State. And I'm going to kind of get into, like I said, my reasoning for making the pick. I know that I'm a little bit late to the party, if you want to say that. I'm not the first recruiting analyst to make this prediction. So I definitely wanted to just give credence there. But I think that I felt confident in making this pick because of all the buzz that I'm seeing around Van Buren, and then kind of from what I've heard from some sources here on this recruitment for the Ducks in the 2024 class. So sorry about that, folks. Having a little bit of technical difficulties. We'll see if my microphone can hang in there with me. But let's see, the visits. We got to follow the visits because that can, definitely lead you to where recruit is at, where they have interest. 2 visits to Oregon is definitely an important development here. I wrote in my latest update that maybe that most recent visit also had a little bit to do with the Elite 11. So that was part of the reason that he came out west to compete in that event. But I'm sure he still wanted to see Oregon on that most recent recruiting trip. And that was big that the Ducks were able to get him on campus and get him on campus the same weekend as Luke Moga, who committed to Oregon the day before the weekend started, or just to start the weekend, right, on Friday. Luke Moga, of course, being the 2024 Phoenix, Arizona Sunny Slope quarterback that committed to the Ducks. Just absolutely freak athleticism. State champion or tied at least state champion 100-meter speed. So we know that Luke Moga is already a big piece of this recruiting class for Oregon. But to talk a little bit more about Van Buren, he's gone on the record speaking highly of his relationship with Oregon offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach Will Stein. So we know that the Ducks have a good relationship there with Van Buren. And there's a lot of buzz behind Will Stein right now, just as a recruiter on the recruiting trail, even in the short amount of time that he has been at Oregon, already landed a pair of quarterbacks. And Austin Novosad flipping the 2023 quarterback, now an early enrollee, true freshman from Baylor. I think it was like in less than a week after getting the job. So that speaks a lot to Stein's ability as a recruiter. And then really, you got to give him some credit for being an early identifier with Luke Moga. Oregon was one of the earlier offers in his recruitment. I'm not going to say they were the first because they weren't, but Mo got that offer in January, and then from Oregon, and then you see all of these schools coming in, and by the time he goes to make his commitment, he's got 25 scholarship offers to his name. So I think that you definitely need to mention that Will Stein played a big role in that recruitment, and it looks like Michael Van Buren could be another guy that could be closing in on being another massive vote of confidence in his ability as a coach and the vision that he has for the Oregon program. So that's another point that I wanted to get into is that we're already seeing Will Stein kind of making his name known as a recruiter after coming over from UTSA. I feel like we've seen it with a number of Oregon coaches, whether we're talking about Junior Adams or we're talking about Carlos Laughlin, some coaches that have come over to Oregon from other stops, and then they have that national brand behind them. All the USC and Washington fans are going to say it's NIL money, but we know about the value of a brand, and I think that Will Stein could definitely become another one of those guys, the coaches at Oregon, that comes to Oregon as not an unknown, but a lesser-known coach, and then you could just really see them kick it into high gear and take their recruiting game to the next level with that O behind them. And, look at that offense that he put together with the Roadrunners at UTSA. That's got to be another reason that guys like Michael Van Buren are heavily considering Oregon right now. So there's that positive buzz with Oregon that he's gone on record talking about, having that good relationship with Will Stein, liking what the Ducks are building. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. You changed my microphone. Here we are. All right, I'm going off the laptop microphone. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but your tech doesn't always work with you. So hopefully the audio doesn't change too much, but I'm rocking and rolling still. So that's the latest that we're hearing from Van Buren just about Oregon. Positive buzz for Oregon, positive buzz for Will Stein. But then you also have to ask yourself, and I was talking about it a couple weeks ago, heading into the spring game, are Moga and Van Buren both on board with a 2-quarterback class? And I think Van Buren, was asked about that at the Elite 11 Regional in Eugene, and he more or less said, I'm a competitor, and it's not going to affect his recruitment. So that's definitely a unique element that is on the table right now. The Ducks haven't taken 2 quarterbacks since 2020. And it at least looks like Van Buren's open to the idea, and he already got a really gifted passer and quarterback in Luke Moga, who's relatively new to the position here. after playing some wide receiver before going full-time quarterback in 2022. So what other elements can we get into here with Van Buren and the Ducks? I think another reason that I put this pick in is because of Oregon's latest commitment, Ife Obadegwu, who's also an All-American out of St. Francis Academy in Baltimore at the quarterback spot. That's maybe it's the other side of the ball, but having Obadegwu in the fold is only going to strengthen Oregon's chances here with Van Buren because you have another recruit, another player, another peer that can be in his ear about the Ducks. And it's a question that I've been asking recruits more frequently now in these interviews that I do with them is, what's it kind of like when you're getting recruited by a coach versus getting recruited by another player or, another high school teammate? And it's just basically the easiest way to put it is that it's a more casual, more relaxed approach by another player. A coach can be on you all the time, blowing up your phone, saying, hey, we need to get you out here, whatever it is. But when a player is doing it, it's like, hey, man, this is why I committed. This is what I saw the Ducks were building. And, here's 10 other guys in the class. Oregon's at 11 commits now, by the way, in 2024. Here's 10 other guys that are buying into the vision that Dan Lane has in the program. And we want you to be a part of that. So I think that having that presence is definitely going to help. Tosh Boy was also in the DMV area, Oregon's defensive coordinator. You're seeing a lot of these coaches posting where they're visiting now that the Ducks and the rest of college football are in the spring evaluation window. So coaches are getting out on the road, going all over the place. We saw Will Stein out in the state of Arizona, probably stopped by, I think he stopped by Sunny Slope to see Luke Moga. And then now we're seeing Tosh in the DMV area. So I would not be surprised if he made it out there at St. Francis. I'm not saying he did, but just because he was in the DMV area, you can see why that would be a stop for him. I mean, St. Francis Academy is a national powerhouse, so maybe got another chance to see Van Buren there and check in on the newest commit, Ife Obadegwu. So I think that's another element that is adding into or that is falling into Oregon's favor now. Now that they have a teammate of Van Buren in the fold. And then to not even talk about the recruiting approach necessarily with Ife Obadegwu and Van Buren, at the end of the day, you are recruiting a player to move across the country to play college football for you. And that's not easy. Moving far away from home, I think that, a lot of recruits talk about distance not being a factor in their decisions. And maybe it's not. It's not the case for everybody. I've had a handful of recruits talk about, hey, it's important that my family be able to come watch my games. But the other point I wanted to make here with Oregon already having to commit from St. Francis, is that even though they're not on the same side of the ball, Ife and MVB, you're able to, make that move together, right? You can say, hey, I have a teammate, I have, a piece of home, a close friend that's able to go across the country with you and kind of, make you more comfortable at a school. We saw it most recently, if you even want to look into the DMV area again, when the Ducks signed a pair of Baltimore standouts in Dante Thornton, an All-American wide receiver from Baltimore, and safety Damon David out of the Baltimore area as well. I want to say that they were roommates, but they were best friends, really close friends. And I know that played a factor in why Damon David ended up committing to Oregon. With Dante already being an earlier commit in the 2021 class, Damon was a later add, but I remember that from my time covering both of those recruitments, just talking about the value of those friendships and of those relationships. And there's so many different layers in this recruitment, so I'm just trying to peel back some of them and just give some sound reasoning on why I really think that it's making sense, and that I'm not just following in the same path of some of the other recruiting industry experts. I got to give a tip of the cap to them because they were earlier on these picks, but I'm trying to break it down in my own way. Let's see what else we have here. I think another element that you have to add to this recruitment, look at the top schools that he's considering right now, right? Oregon, Penn State, and Maryland. A significant development on the Penn State side of things is that towards the end of April, as the month was kind of winding down, you got to track some offers. Penn State made a new offer in the 2024 class, and that is to Trevor Jackson out of West Orange High School in Winter Garden, Florida. So what does that tell you? The fact that Penn State, who had previously long been considered, I would add, the leader for Michael Van Buren, is offering another quarterback. Well, you could say, they're maybe they don't view themselves as the leaders anymore for Michael Van Buren. And this is why you can't put all your chips in on one recruit, because there can be all this positive buzz. There was so much positive momentum for Penn State with Michael Van Buren in the 2024 recruiting class, but a pair of visits to Oregon within the same month, and it can change just like that. So to me, at least on the surface, I don't have intel on this, but on the surface, Penn State offering another quarterback in 2024 at least tells me that they're preparing for the situation that they could miss out on Michael Van Buren in the 2024 class. So you have to be prepared for that situation if it arises. You're going to stay involved until Van Buren makes a commitment. Right now, he has a commitment date that is set for July 8th. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in this episode, but you can't put all your chips in on one guy. And I think the fact that Penn State made another offer at quarterback in 2024 is a notable development that I think tells you a little bit about where they maybe feel like they stand in this pursuit of Michael Van Buren. And then Maryland. Maryland is another interesting program to look at here. That's obviously Michael Van Buren's home state. Maryland hasn't necessarily been a powerhouse program, certainly not in the national sense, not really even in the Big Ten either, right? You're looking at Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan as some of the heavy hitters in that conference, but they have that home element with Mike Locksley as their head coach. You had Talia Tagovailoa come through there recently. I actually don't know what the quarterback room looks like there. I'm just trying to tap into some of my Maryland knowledge from what comes to mind. And then if you also want to, look at branding and, who has the stronger brand on their side, I think you would definitely favor Oregon and Penn State, with Maryland being an Under Armour school. I'm not saying that that's a factor I know carries weight in this recruitment. I'm just saying it's something that is worth bringing to the table. If you're looking at all the different elements that go into a recruitment, you have to look at the on-field product, the long-term vision for the program, who has momentum in any given recruitment, and then life after football. And as we know, NIL is definitely a factor in modern recruiting. And if you're looking at building a brand, being able to make a name for yourself, play for a big time school, Oregon has that opportunity for Van Buren, and so do these other schools. But Nike versus Under Armour, maybe that's a little bit of an element we can talk about. I think I just found out not too long ago that Under Armour is headquartered in Baltimore, so, or at least they have a headquarters in Baltimore. So that's kind of an interesting little wrinkle to add to it. But yeah, I think just all the buzz that you have with Van Buren, and then you're also seeing other recruits. You're seeing other recruits locally recruiting Van Buren on social media, and they're not shying away from it. Ife Obadegwu, after he committed to Oregon, he was saying, time to come home. I'll see if I can find the tweet, but this is the picture. It was originally from Jordan Anderson, the wide receiver commit to Oregon. He's on the left over here, and then you have Michael Van Buren on the right. And Jordan Anderson says it right here. This is what they waiting to see. And then you have the duck emoji and the home emoji, and then tagging Michael Van Buren. So you look at the recent momentum that the Ducks have built on the recruiting trail after landing Iffy, following the spring game, Luke Moga, Casey Kelly. I just feel like it's it's tracking. It's tracking towards the Ducks are going to go on a run. I wasn't myself expecting Iffy's commitment, but I knew that he had spoken very highly of Oregon in the past. But you're seeing it here that Michael Van Buren could very well be a missing piece of the puzzle here for Oregon in the 2024 recruiting class. And maybe that's a nice way to segue to what a commitment from Michael Van Buren would mean for Oregon here in the 2024 recruiting class, because we know how important timing is in recruiting. That's a big deal. That's why Oregon's trying to get some of these commitments coming out of the spring game, is to capitalize on that momentum and get hot rolling into the summer, which we also know is a very important time on the recruiting calendar. So I think that a commitment from Michael Van Buren could really send Oregon's 2024 class into high gear. And this is a class under Dan Lanning that already ranks inside the top 10 nationally. Following Obadegu's commitment on Sunday, the Ducks are now ranked 7th nationally by 247 Sports, and I want to say Rivals as well. I think On3 has them in the top 10. So there's undeniable momentum on the recruiting trail for Oregon right now. And then the staff is getting out on the road to go see a lot of their top targets, some of them that were just in Eugene for visits. I was on the phone with Bennett Warren earlier today. He's a Texas offensive tackle that the Ducks are going after in 2024. He told me that he just got visited by Carlos Loughlin, who was the coach that offered him, and he had an official visit set up to Oregon for next month. So there's all this momentum behind Oregon, and we know that it's important to get your quarterback in the fold sooner rather than later, because so often they can kind of become the face of a recruiting class at their respective school. So Iffy Obadegu is now the headliner in Oregon's 2024 recruiting class, just narrowly edging out Jordan Anderson in terms of a rating standpoint and ranking standpoint. But this would be, like I said, Michael Van Buren committing to Oregon would be a huge vote of confidence in Will Stein, a huge vote of confidence in Dan Lanning, a vote of confidence in the Oregon program. And I think it could really just kick them into high gear because they're in good standing for a number of guys, right? Kamar Matudi is a big-time linebacker that I've been covering for a while out of Southern California. I think Oregon leads there, and I wrote a prediction for him to go to Oregon back in March. So they're in a good spot for him. I think they're in a good spot with Dylan Williams, the Long Beach Poly linebacker. I'm going to be making it out to Long Beach Poly and Junipero Serra today for their showcases. That's the plan right now. Serra to see Dakota Fields, another big-time corner in the 2024 recruiting class that I know loves the Ducks. And then Dylan Williams, the linebacker out of Long Beach Poly. Going to try to get you guys updates over there on both of those guys. So, again, important to tap in with me and follow me on Twitter at Torres Sports if you haven't already, so that you can stay up to date with the latest in Oregon football recruiting. So I hope I'm explaining just how important it would be and the impact that Michael Van Buren's commitment could have for Oregon. I think another thing that's worth mentioning, and I wrote it in my prediction piece, some of the sources that I've been talking to seem to be indicating that there's some flexibility with that July 8th commitment date for Michael Van Buren, which he has set right now, which again would be a positive development and build on the good buzz and the good standing that they have with Michael Van Buren right now. So there's just too much on the table. There's too much that we've seen, I think, to not have Oregon as the leader right now. And, another thing that's worth mentioning is that Oregon hasn't exactly hit it out of the park with quarterback recruiting in recent years. I'm not trying to be overly critical, but, this season is the first season since Justin Herbert that the Ducks will have had the same quarterback from the last season going into this season. That's not to say that they haven't had talented players. The Ducks have recruited talented players at the quarterback position, but recent on-field results haven't necessarily been the best, right? You had Tyler Shuck, who was recruited to Oregon. Things weren't that great for him in Eugene. Kind of looked like he was playing like a deer in headlights a lot of the times. It's kind of how I looked at it when I was covering him. He's now at Texas Tech, and the Ducks will play them to one of their non-conference games out in Lubbock. So that's a game to look forward to. Then the Ducks had Anthony Brown, who, to his credit, played for the Ravens in the 2023 NFL, 2022 NFL season, excuse me, and he had some success there. But if you watched Oregon football, Anthony Brown was not exactly a ringing success story at the quarterback position while he was at Oregon. It's also worth mentioning that the Ducks under Mario Cristobal, that offense, a whole lot of checkdowns, a whole lot of short passes, and then Dan Lanning, Kenny Dillingham, and now Will Stein come in, and they're all ready to. Kenny Dillingham took the top off of defenses. He said, let Bo Nix go out there and let it rip. Let my quarterback take some chances, be aggressive, and take some shots. And look at what happened to that Oregon offense. So I want to be critical of the history at quarterback for Oregon, but also admit the recent success that they have had and how I think things are on an awesome trajectory under offensive coordinator Will Stein. I think that much in the same way that we're seeing Dan Lanning learn from Mario Cristobal in terms of laying the foundation to be a recruiting power and a national recruiting power at that, Dan Lanning picked up right where Mario Cristobal left off when it comes to recruiting for Oregon. Will Stein comes in from UTSA, and I'm sure he's looking through some old tape from that Kenny Dillingham offense, and he's just taking out his notepad. That worked. That worked. Oh, hey, he didn't do this, but I did this at UTSA, and I think that could work. So I think that Will Stein has a golden opportunity to pick up right where Kenny Dillingham left off, because you still have Bo Nix, you still have Troy Franklin, you have Trayshawn Holden, you have Tez Johnson, you have Chris Hudson, you have a freak athlete, 6'6" wide receiver in Kyler Casper at your disposal. You have a former five-star recruit in Jurion Dickey, who isn't even on campus yet. You have him. He'll be a factor this year. Chris Hudson, Justice Lowe. The Ducks are also in the running for Gary Bryant Jr., the former USC wide receiver. He's supposed to announce his commitment on Saturday. So all that to say, Will Stein has a really good opportunity to just light things up with the Oregon offense this year, and I think he's going to. So all that to say, Oregon is kind of, I think they have the chance to right the ship a little bit when it comes to quarterback recruiting. And if you have Moga and Van Buren in the fold, I think you're putting yourself in tremendous shape for long-term success at the quarterback position. I think that Michael Van Buren is a little bit more college ready than Luke Moga is right now. But if you look at Luke Moga's tape, you'd have to be blind to not see the upside there. I mean, crazy speed, really, really good mobility, agility, short area burst to improvise, and then he's got some really very evident arm talent, throwing on the run, throwing against his body. He's just a playmaker. But at the same time, I think you also want to give yourself, I don't know if stability is the right word, but maybe a little bit more of a sure option, if that makes sense. A more polished guy, a more productive guy. And I think that that's kind of what you're looking at with Van Buren. So maybe the last point that we can kind of wrap it on here a little bit is that a commitment from Michael Van Buren, and I said this when Luke Moga committed, and I didn't want it to come off as any kind of slight or any sort of disrespect. A commitment from Michael Van Buren would really generate some serious recruiting buzz for the Ducks, and I think could have a very significant domino effect on the national scale with some of these other big-time recruits that they're in the running for. Look at the wide receiver room right now in 2024. Not the room, but the hall. Jordan Anderson's already in the boat from Southern California. I've gotten to see him a bunch of times. That's a dude. Tyser Denmark from Philadelphia. That's the other side of the country. That's the Northeast. That's another dude. Talk about polish, the route running, the playmaking ability. That guy is amazing when it comes to being a wide receiver that you want in your offense. So those guys are already in the fold. And then you also have Dylan Gresham, who is out of San Jacinto High School. He's super productive. He's close with Jordan Anderson. I really like Oregon standing there with him. Then you have Aaron Butler, who was trending to Oregon. Now he's trending to Colorado. We'll see if the Ducks can make up that ground, but I'm not very surprised that he's trending to Colorado. His dad played with Dion. And I've talked a lot about that before. And you also have Ryan Pelham, who was former teammates with Jordan Anderson at Long Beach Millikan High School. Looks like I might get to see him tomorrow at Millikan's showcase. Who else do you have? You have Terry Bussey, the number one athlete in the country, who's a wide receiver out of Timpson, Texas. He recently put the Ducks in his top 10. I'm not exactly sure about Oregon's chances there, but they're a top school for him, so maybe you get him out for a visit. James Madison, the second, a big time wide receiver in the 2024 class out of St. Thomas Aquinas, Fort Lauderdale. That's another school that is on the same level as St. Francis Academy in terms of a national power, storied program. So many good players have come through there. He has Oregon in his top 5. And I think the interesting note to add with Madison is that he's kind of that bigger body wide receiver that the Ducks don't really have right now in this 2024 class. And his relationship with Dan Lanning is next level, top tier. They're both Kansas City natives. So I think that could be kind of the X factor, or at least Oregon's strong pull in the 2024 class with James Madison. The fact that Dan Lanning could very well be the head coach that he's closest with out of any school in his top 5, which also includes Michigan, Louisville, Florida State, and Missouri. So keep an eye out for that one. That's a cross-country guy, but I think that's someone that Oregon has a better chance with than most people would think on the surface, seeing that they haven't, really done a good job in Florida recently. That being said, Malik Terry made it out to Florida to check on one of Oregon's top offensive line targets in 2024. That is Jason Zandamela out of Clearwater, Florida, Clearwater Academy International. He's currently being crystal balled to Florida State. But Alik Terry is trying to get in there and tap into his Florida connections. So maybe we'll see Alik Terry make a stop at St. Thomas Aquinas and check in on James Madison. So all that to say, the Ducks already have some really good receivers in the fold. If you get Van Buren, an Under Armour All-American, a dude who is a national name, a lot of people know him, comes from a huge school that has produced a lot of really good talent. I think that you only strengthen your case to reel in some of these elite names on the 2024 class, whether that's at wide receiver or whether that's at offensive line. You're talking about Brandon Baker, Jason Zandamela, who I just mentioned. You're talking about Bennett Warren out of the state of Texas. He's a big-time offensive tackle. You're looking at Eddie Pierre-Louis, who's a freaky athletic offensive lineman that can scoot. That dude's got some wheels out of the state of Florida, despite being a big-time offensive lineman at 6'3", 315 pounds. So I think that is, I'm just trying to explain, contextualize how much of an impact adding Michael Van Buren in the 2024 recruiting class could have for Oregon. So don't sleep on that, because Oregon's already in the top 10 now. If they get Van Buren, that would help them climb even more. And I'm gonna make a podcast about this, but I'll at least say this on record now. I think I'm pretty confident that Oregon's 2024 recruiting class is going to be the best in program history, because that mark was set by Mario Cristobal in 2021. And let's see where Oregon was at. In 2021, it was either 7 or 6. They were overall ranked 7, and their composite rank was 6. And right now in 2024, Oregon has 11 commitments, and they're already at number 7 nationally. So do with that what you will, but I'm going to do an episode just talking about why I think Dan Lanning is chasing history on the recruiting trail as Oregon's head coach, and why I think he's definitely capable of achieving that history and signing the best class to ever come through Oregon. So I'm going to see if I can get to some of these questions, and then I got to get out of here. So if you have some of them, go ahead and throw them in. This question coming from Cameron Matthew: is there any good recruits this year from Oregon? Yeah, I think there's a couple recruits out of the state of Oregon that are maybe worth knowing, right? I think one of them is Devin Brooks out of Clackamas. He's an offensive lineman that the Ducks are pursuing here in the 2024 class. He's definitely a name worth knowing, and I think Oregon finds themselves going against Washington and USC for Devin Brooks. So he's definitely a name to know. The Ducks already have a commitment from a pair of in-state guys, right? You have North Medford tight end AJ Pugliano, who was the first commit in Oregon's 2024 recruiting class. So he's obviously a guy that the staff, Drew Maringer, sees a lot of upside in. 6'3.5", 220 pounds. Number 2 player in the state of Oregon, number 19 tight end in the country. You also have Joey Olson, who's a tight end out of Lake Ridge High School in Lake Oswego, but he's committed to USC right now. And the Ducks already have 2 tight ends in this 2024 class, in AJ Pugliano and then Jackson Ford out of Melissa, Texas. So I wouldn't expect Oregon to circle back around on Joey Olson. And then you also have Trent Ferguson, who's a commit in the Oregon 2024 recruiting class, offensive tackle out of West Salem High School in Salem, Oregon, 6'7", 300 pounds. He is a guy who's newer to football. Previously, I think, had a background in basketball, but he's another guy, even though he's a little bit of a lower rated recruit right now, he's a guy I would not be surprised to see rise in the recruiting rankings. So that's what you have for the state of Oregon. Question from Wink. If you got time, Max, can you speak on Jacon McCroy development? And I also seen some info on Hayden Shredder. I haven't heard anyone talk about him, but seen on On3, Oregon as the new leader in the recruitment. Yeah, so Jacon McCroy is someone, it's a big-time offensive lineman. So let's just give some background information real quick for those people that maybe are listening and don't know who Jacon McCroy is. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Jacon McCroy is a big-time offensive lineman, offensive tackle. 247 Sports has him at 6'8", 365 pounds, out of the state of Alabama. Clay Chalkville High School out of Pinson, Alabama. And why is Pinson a notable city? It's because that's where Bo Nix is from, and that's where Ted Johnson is from. So admittedly, I don't have a whole lot on Jacon McCroy. I do remember talking to a source a couple of weeks ago after Jacon McCroy visited Oregon, and he got to spend some time with current offensive linemen at Oregon, and they had an awesome time together. So he loved his visit, and I think that might be part of the reason. That's the only tangible intel I have right now about him and why there's some buzz between him and the Ducks. But looking at the state of Alabama, I think Oregon's trying to make some noise aside from this. From McCroy, there are also, I think, they're one of the top schools for Jordan Ross, if not the leader, the big-time defensive end, edge rusher, top recruit in the state of Alabama, out of Birmingham, Alabama, the Vestavia Hills. He was in Eugene for the spring game. So if you can get him and Jacon McCroy out of the state of Alabama, then you are really putting yourself in a good position there. I admittedly haven't heard of Hayden Shredder. I'm going to try to look him up right now. He is an offensive tackle out of Cherry Creek High School in Englewood, Colorado, which is where the Ducks got Blake Purchase in 2023. He's a 2-time, I want to say, Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Colorado. That's an edge rusher that the Ducks signed in 2023. So looking to tap back into that school, Cherry Creek, which is one of the best programs in the state of Colorado. That's another guy from out west that you probably have a better chance with, just if you're looking at distance, right? Treader listed at 6'6", 300 pounds, 11 reported offers, including Arizona State, Charlotte, Colorado State, and Iowa State. So I gotta do a little bit of digging there on Treader, but that's just kind of some background there and why I think maybe they have some buzz there in that recruitment, if that's what you're saying in this comment. Let's see here. Another one from Link, assuming A. Smith Jr., probably Achilles Smith Jr., is the plan for 2025. Will that be the turning point for Oregon quarterback recruiting to join the top-tier talent at that position? Not shortchanging Moga or MVP, maybe you meant MVP, but just from a star rating. Yeah, and then a later comment here saying Oregon has yet to land a 5-star quarterback, but they did land Ty Thompson in 2021. And I think he was a 5-star quarterback on some recruiting services. I think that, I've seen Oregon fans talk about this on my shows before. are not necessarily landing top tier guys from a ratings and ranking standpoint. A 5-star, you can go. It's a laundry list of guys, really top tier guys that Oregon has been in on, but hasn't necessarily been able to finish the deal with. You look at Nico Iamaleava out of Southern California. He signed with Tennessee after playing his high school ball at I think he was at Long Beach Poly before transferring to Warren in Downey, California. That guy was like, it looked like he was going to be a Duck, and it didn't end up happening. He ended up at Tennessee. Junior Rashada, another big time quarterback. The Ducks were in the running for. Dante Moore was a 5-star quarterback, and they had him. Dante Moore would be at Oregon. Let's not kid ourselves. Dante Moore would be at Oregon right now if the Ducks had not lost Kenny Dillingham to Arizona State. That's my belief. That was obviously just a huge part in that recruitment. That would have been his position coach. Kenny Dillingham has been a tremendous hit with recruits, and now Kenny Dillingham landed Jaden Rashada since landing at Arizona State. So Oregon has strong quarterback recruiting history on its side, but landing those guys and then signing them are two very different things. So I guess you could say if the Ducks were hypothetically to get Achilles Smith Jr. in the 2023 class, he told me that that Oregon is in the top 3 for him right now. But I think that I don't know. I don't really know if I call that a turning point, maybe in terms of getting 5 stars. But you got to remember that they had Dante Moore last year, and they would have had him if not for coaching turnover. So I don't know if I would say that's a turning point necessarily. Depends on how you view that. But I think I got to wind down today's show, you guys. Got to hit the road here to get out to Junipero Serra for their showcase. But if you're still in the live chat, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Oregon Football Max Torres have been doing a bunch of live streams lately. And then share the Ducks Dish podcast with your friends, with your family, and with other Duck fans. Always trying to grow that community, and greatly, greatly appreciate your support of my work, whether it's here on YouTube, on the Ducks Dish podcast, on the audio platform, or reading my work over on ducksdigest.com. The support doesn't go unnoticed, and I am incredibly grateful. And make sure you follow me on Twitter at @HemTorresSports. But until next time, thank you guys so much for taking some time out of your day to talk some Ducks with me, talk some recruiting. If you're looking for Oregon recruiting, I am your guy. And we will see you in the next episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.